where you came up with the 7 things high performers say instead of I'm too busy. And this is something that I've talked about it on the show before. A lot of my life, I've been busy, and it hasn't always been good busy. Sometimes it's busy, busy, right? And not the kind that you feel productive in. Talk to me about some of these things. And if you want to go through all 7, if you have them handy, if not, just give me a couple of them.
I appreciate you asking that. This is something that we posted on LinkedIn, and it's one of the things I try to do on LinkedIn is try to find a lot of actionable things that people can apply right away. So I brought up the list in front of me when you mentioned it. So the first one is, if I make this a priority, what can I move down the list? And the reason we put that first is because a lot of people are in the position of wanting to help their colleagues, but they simply don't have the bandwidth. And especially if the boss comes to you and says, "Hey, I need this done," and you don't have the ability to say no, how do you reorient them by saying, "Hey, I want to help, but I want to make sure that I'm also accomplishing some of these other things first." And I'll throw out a couple more of these because they follow a similar theme. Another option is to say, "I can jump in, but I just want to be transparent about my capacity." A third thing is, "I want to make sure that I can give this the attention it deserves." And then I'll just throw out one more, which is, "I want to say yes to this. I don't want to say yes to this and then become a bottleneck later." So in all of these quotes, what you're doing is and this is really critical, is you're expressing the motivation and the desire to help the other person. Because remember, the best teammates don't just do their job, they make other people better. But at the same time, the solution isn't for you to work late or to work weekends or to come in early. And that's the bargain that a lot of people are making, and it's costing them their life satisfaction, frankly, and their health. Can't have that. That's not beneficial to you or to your organization. So these are nice little phrases that you can use, and you can use, and you can find them all on LinkedIn under Ron Friedman, PhD. And they're quotes you can use to maintain that desire to want to help other people, but at the same time also protect your focus and to move the ball forward on more important things without saying no.
I think back to my wife being a young teacher and being in her early 20s, and school got out at exactly 2 something, let's call it 2:15. And she would be home at like 2:20, 2:22. And the reason I know this is because I was starting out as a financial advisor, knocking on doors, cold calling. I had no business. And by the time she got home was like when my day was starting to happen. I always felt like, oh, her day's ending and mine's starting. But I'll never forget her ability to be disciplined and dialed into her day was something that always stood with me, because most of the teachers that she worked with would stay late, and they would be there till, and she worked in elementary education. So a lot less grading papers, a lot less other things, but very impactful for the lesson plans, very heavily prioritized on creating the day and keeping the room organized. But that was her main job. And so I would always say, I'm like, how are you out and everybody else is still at school? And she's like, because when everybody else is walking around talking to each other in between, I'm working on tomorrow's lessons plan. And when everybody else is gossiping in the room about X, Y, and Z, I'm focused on getting the extra couple of minutes for the students that need it. I'm getting them done. And I'm doing my time at the bus or whatever it may be, but I do that on the days I'm supposed to serve. And on those other days, I'm not hanging around and waiting, which means I get out of the parking lot earlier. And it was this whole dynamic. But if you look at something, and this is, so the reason I bring this up, Ron, is because so many people think, oh, well, I'm in a business where my time is controlled by somebody else. And the reality is her time was controlled up to a certain point. And because she was so disciplined at it, I've always admired that. That's very hard to do. And for those that are teachers, I know there's other things that pop up, and she also did all them. She's a phenomenal teacher and has been for many, many years. But I just thought that was such a good dynamic. It's prioritizing, it's going to your things, your 7 things that I think are really valuable.
Yeah. And in the research on what high performing teams do differently, we didn't just look at what the leaders do. We also looked at what individuals on those teams do. And a lot of this goes to your point about how your wife structures her day. So what we found there are particular habits that people on super teams use to stay focused. And it's not because, to your point, a lot of it feels like it's controlled by your leader. But the truth is, on the best teams, people are carving out time for getting their most important things done. And how they do it is they use three strategies. They look forward, they look backward, and they stay present. So let me explain each of those in turn. Looking forward means at the end of the week, either on Friday afternoon or on Sunday morning, they'll look ahead at what they have coming up. So they're getting locked in on what they need to do during the week. And then they do something called time blocking, meaning they set appointments with themselves where they will do a particular task that needs doing. So a lot of people, they just kind of have their calendar fill up with meetings, and then they wonder why they don't have time to get their assignments done. Time blocking involves creating a little scheduled block for, say, writing that report or researching that proposal, and putting that in before the week even starts ensures it gets done. So that's looking forward. Looking backward is after a good day or a bad day, reflecting on what just happened. What made that a good day? How do I have more days like that? Or after a bad day, thinking, okay, that was not a great day. How do I avoid a day like that again? So you're constantly reflecting and learning and improving over time. So that's looking backwards. Staying present is about minimizing points of transition. So if you think about when we're most distractible, it's usually after the end of one task and before the beginning of another task. So for example, we're at our most distractible after leaving meetings. There's something called meeting recovery syndrome. It can last for up to 45 minutes. After you leave a meeting, there's like 45 minutes where you're completely useless. One solution is to have fewer meetings. The other is to know in advance what you're going to do next. So one way of minimizing those transition points is to batch similar tasks. So for example, if you have to read an article, couple that with reading a report. And now you're reading three things in a row instead of reading, email, meeting, reading, trying to read again. That's much harder. But if you do the same sort of thing back to back to back, it's much easier because there's fewer transitions. So looking forward, looking backward, and staying present. And you can do that through those strategies. And you don't need a great team to do it. Anybody can apply that right away.
Well, if you take these points and you apply them to yourself as an individual, one of the things I found as a teammate is if I control what I can control, which is my output and my objectives and my goals and my discipline, I become a much better teammate all the time. I'm always becoming, you just described what someone would do to make themselves better. And if they're doing those things, they're going to show up to the team even better. I find a lot of people struggle with their own day. And then, as a CEO, you hear this and see this a lot. And this is something that I think is really interesting. And that is when someone's describing work as the problem, but it's all the other things outside of work that's actually the problem. And you're hearing it, but you can't say that as the boss. You can't say, sounds to me like here's the problem. Your spouse isn't holding their end of the bargain. You're showing up late half the time. You're not able to stay focused. But the reality is, if we focus on what we can control and our own individual output, I imagine that makes us a much better teammate.
It absolutely does. But there's a limit to this. And let me explain that. One of the things we found in our research, and this was completely counterintuitive, we were not expecting this, is we looked to see all the productivity hacks that we hear about. Do they make for a more effective team? So let me give you some examples of what some of these hacks I'm describing. Number one, turn off all notifications. Number two, batch your emails, meaning only look at it 3 times a day. Look at it when you first get in, 12 o'clock, 4:30 p.m. before you leave. Number 3, put your phone in the other room. We look to see, do these productivity hacks lead to a high-performing teams? And you would think that they would, right? Because a team is just a collective of individuals. And if all the individuals are doing well, shouldn't the team also do better? What we found is that those productivity hacks actually make no difference on team performance. And here's why. It's because if I unilaterally decide that I'm not going to check my emails except for 3 times a day, then I become your bottleneck. And so what's good for the individual is worse for the team. So the way I describe it in super teams is one person's deep work becomes another person's bottleneck. And so what the best teams do is they have those collaborative decisions around, okay, we're going to have a focus-free block, 3:30 to 5 o'clock on Tuesdays, or we're going to have a meeting-free day. And if you can coordinate when people are on and when they're not on, then everyone's performance improves. The mistake that most companies make is they assume that more collaboration is better. And it's not the case, because the secret to good collaboration is toggling between alone time and group time. And the classic example of this is brainstorming. So when we think about the classic collaborative activity, everybody get into the conference room, let's come up with some good ideas. Turns out, if you really want people to have good ideas and you want higher number of ideas, what you want to do is something completely different. It's called brain writing. And what brain writing is, every single person in the group individually on their own in their desk comes up with 5 ideas, and then bring those 5 ideas into the conference room, because now we can build on one another's ideas. What happens with brainstorming is one person shouts out an idea, and now everybody in the room is evaluating that idea instead of coming up with their own ideas. And so that's the right approach, is toggling between solo work and collaborative work, not constant togetherness.
Yeah. So YouTube has this cool feature where they pick the next video for you, and it's right here on this screen. So I hope you enjoy this next video.